Welcome, listeners. This is Lawrence Yang. I'm a family doctor from Surrey, and I have with me my friend and classmate in the Clinician Quality Academy out of the BC Patient Safety and Quality Council, Dr. Jennifer Ross. Tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jennifer Ross, and I've been a family physician for 20 years now in full-service family practice.
And you live here on the island. I'm here, I visit on the island. We just finished the Quality Improvement Conference, and I was like, oh, I got to come and see Jennifer's new place. And that's where we are. We're in one of the exam rooms in your clinic space. What is a community health center? Like, how would you define it? I remember I attended your Sauder leadership training course where you graduated, and you talked a little bit about the idea for this. And at that time, none of this clinic existed yet, right? Or was it starting?
It was in process, yes.
Yeah, so how would you define a community health center for the listeners?
For sure. So community health centers have two main core principles. So one is that they're community governed. So they have a community board of directors, and usually the structure is a nonprofit or at times a cooperative structure as well. And the second principle of community health centers is that they bring a social justice and equity lens to the health of the population and look at what are known as the social determinants of health. So they provide patient care, but they do it with that lens in mind while providing care.
So I think you mentioned two things, something about it could be run as a cooperative or as a
nonprofit organization. And
how do those things differ?
That's actually something that's out of my wheelhouse. I think most of them are nonprofits, sort of standard nonprofit organizations usually with charitable status. I think there are a few around that are run as a co-op, where I think that means that the people who come are regarded as members in some way. I'm not entirely sure about that. Okay. Yeah. Like I think Umbrella on the mainland is a co-op as opposed to
So there's a clinic called Umbrella on the mainland. I don't even know, even though I live in Surrey on the mainland, but I didn't know there was one called Umbrella. Yeah. It reminds me of, there's a video game called Resident Evil. It's about zombies, and the evil corporation was called Umbrella.
Oh gosh.
Anyways, sorry, Umbrella Clinic. But your clinic here, it's actually called something with the word family in it. What was it?
So the nonprofit organization is called Pacific Center Family Services Association.
Okay.
PCFSA for short.
Okay, Pacific Center Family Services Association.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, so we just say PCFSA. And PCFSA has actually been in the community for 4 decades.
No way.
Yeah, in different locations around the West Shore, and they have a very long history of providing low-cost mental health services in the community, as well as other community programs for like youth and elderly people, and different kinds of programming in the community. And so it was about 3 years ago now that Dr. Randall Mason and I were sort of thinking about the community health center model within the context of the evolving primary care network here. And we were able to connect with these folks because it seemed like the sort of type of work that we were looking to do was similar, and they also had this beautiful space, and so it seemed like a natural fit to pursue that relationship, and that's part of how we ended up here.
So remind me again, Pacific Center Family Services Association. Yeah, they were already offering for about 4 decades different kind of like community services, such as counseling.
Yep, counseling.
And it's a nonprofit.
Yep.
So they kind of raise funds like through charitable donations.
They raise through charitable donations, but they have other sources of funding as well. So, for example, MCFD funds certain of the counseling positions. The Health Authority will fund some of the mental health and substance use counseling positions and programs. So with the nonprofit structure, you can multi-source your funding, right? Because
you're allowed to be creative because you're not making profit. Everything you get goes into paying the people, paying for the materials, the resources, the overhead costs of where you are.
Yeah, so you can you can obtain funding from the different ministries that will fund different kinds of programs and then house them all under one roof.
And so you have to apply for that funding somewhere. And so somebody has to vet you. The funding sources have to vet you and say, like, you know, you're a legit person, you're a legit organization, so we're going to fund you.
Yeah.
Is that a very complicated process?
Again, that's out of my wheelhouse, but more that would be under the role of the executive director and the board of directors to be working with the funders directly.
How important do you think it was for PCFSA to have been in existence for over 4 decades in order to have that maturity to be able to access the funding sources to be able to make this clinic a reality? Is that a really big part of it?
I think it was a huge part of it, actually. Pacific Center already had a very good reputation in the community for providing services, long-standing reputation, already had a number of programs on the go, and so I think it was a big part of it. And then the other piece too is that because they have been in the community for so long, they already have pre-existing relationships with all the other agencies, lots of the the school-based programs, all the other kind of programs that people need to access to find different kinds of care. So
so the idea of community health center, you said you and Randall had been looking into it, Dr. Randall Mason had been looking into it about 3 years ago. When did you first become aware of the potential for the CHC model?
It was 2019.
Oh, it was just about 3 years ago.
Yeah, 2019. Randall and I had both previously worked in community health centers, so I trained in Ontario actually, where CHCs are more common, and Randall has also had, I can't remember exactly where his experience was, but had that experience as well, and we're familiar with the model. And so what we actually, one of the first things we did was reach out to the BC Association for Community Health Centers.
Oh, there's actually an association.
Oh yeah, there is.
So
absolutely.
if people Google BC Association for Community Health Centers, they'd be able to find more information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there do they have blueprints on it, or a strategic blueprints on how you might build one?
Yes, they do actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they've really grown over the last couple of years. So at the time, I can't remember, I think he was the president or the ED, I can't recall exactly his role, but anyways, this person named Gray Scholler, he was one of the clinicians down at...
Gray Shoulder?
No, Scholler, Showler.
Okay.
So he was actually a nurse down at Kool-Aid in Victoria, but that was another job that he did, and so we just kind of got a hold of him and asked him, what was the process? Where's the ministry at with this policy approach, and how do we kind of get this going in our community? And so he gave us some good advice, and he actually connected us with Pacific Center, and he did suggest that it was maybe not the most or the best way to go to try to just set up your own nonprofit from scratch. That if there is a nonprofit,
partner with someone.
Yeah, if there is a nonprofit in the community that already kind of has a similar vision and whatnot, that would be way easier.
So, you got some information from your work or training experience in Ontario. You and Randall connected with the British Columbia Association for Community Health Centers. And then who were the other partners that you really needed to make this a reality?
Well, Pacific Center, and then also at the time we were on the Primary Care Network Leadership Committee. So this
is part of the Division of Family Practice?
Yeah. So the South Island Division was a Wave 1 PCN community. So in 2018 we did the service plan, and then in 2019 we were allocated a collection of resources. And so part of getting this place to happen was to secure the resources, like the family physician contracts, the nurses, so on and so forth. So we worked with the PCN process and leadership committee to get those things. Yeah. So on that committee, you have all the different stakeholders in the PCN, including the patient partners, who were very important to actually the process of getting this model accepted.
So you sat at a table with the Division of Family Practice, with your own colleagues from Southern Vancouver Island, and also with patient partners, and you discussed this idea of maybe we can do a community health center where we use some of this ministry allotted funding for nurses and nurse practitioners and social workers and counselors, and maybe we can combine it with a nonprofit who might house us. So there's it was a really big teamwork thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did I miss any parties in there? Were there other parties involved that you can think of?
Well, the health authority certainly plays a role as well.
Authority.
Yeah.
What is the health authority? Is the one who employs some of your nurses and
actually, in this community health center model, the health authority does not employ the clinicians.
Oh, okay.
The health authority's role is to flow the funds to a Pacific Center.
Oh, interesting.
And to manage the master service contract. So Pacific Center will have a contract with Island Health to sort of outline our deliverables at a very high level, and then Pacific Center works with the health authority around reporting and flowing of funds, but Pacific Center actually employs the people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this particular community health center actually is able to be a little bit more autonomous in how it designs its clinical services.
Yeah.
And then it just needs to report back some deliverable metrics to the health authority.
Yes.
That's really special, I think. Don't you think that's something pretty unique about your clinic?
I think so. I think it's a really important piece. Actually, that's something that I remember listening to Michael Garden speak at Souder about the idea of setting the high level deliverables, but then letting the folks who are on the front lines kind of design the system to meet those deliverables, and how that tends to be more successful than the sort of command and control type model that you sometimes see in other places. So that's, I think, really lucky for us.
Was that the principle that was called tight, loose, tight, or loose, tight?
Maybe. I can't remember.
That's really cool. So are you able to speak to some of the deliverables that Pacific is tasked to report back to the island?
For sure, yeah. Well, Ministry of Health is very much interested in attachment, of course. Okay. So we have an attachment target of about 6,700 new patients. Wow. And then we need to report on how many providers we've hired. So we have an allocation of certain numbers of each, and so we're supposed to tell them, have we hired everyone or not? And then we're meant to report on some very basic things like how many in-person visits are we providing, how many telehealth, how many group visits, how much outreach are we doing, and those sorts of things. They haven't yet asked for sort of details around our priority populations and how who we're serving and how many and etc. But we're interested in building a way to look at that for ourselves, just to know that we're delivering the services to the populations that we set out to.
Yeah, some of that would involve, it sounds like you're speaking more to how the team really cares about health equity and social justice. And so I think you're talking about actually recording maybe into your electronic medical record system some metrics representing social determinants of health.
Yeah. Yes.
Has that type of data recording system already been invented? Why are you laughing?
I'm just laughing because I've spent quite a bit of time sort of asking everyone I can think of, hoping that I wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel, or that we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel here, but I haven't found a already determined kind of way. Certainly, again, in Ontario, where the CHC model has existed for a much longer time, their version of the BC Association for Community Health Centers does have a more sort of robust approach to that type of data gathering. But here in BC, we don't quite have that yet. There's another physician that you might know named Vanessa Bursick, I'm probably
No,
mispronouncing her last name, but
I don't know
she's she was in Vancouver. She's recently moved to the island up near Comox, but this is kind of really her big area of interest, and so she's been working with some folks over at PHSA
the provincial
who are
health
trying to develop a standardized approach.
for CHCs.
Well, no, for anyone to gather data on social determinants of health,
yes.
and then to also look at, okay, like, so you gather the information, and then, you know, what are then the interventions that you would look at, and then what kind of, like, the
impact
measure.
you expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So trying to sort of, you know, do that. So it's a bit of an interesting time, though. I think there's lots of kind of cooks in this kitchen trying to figure this out right now. But yeah, there's not, to my knowledge, a sort of a standardized way across. I noticed that on the Health Data Coalition, there is a section for social determinants of health. However, the last time I checked, it wasn't yet populated. So yeah, I think people are starting to haven't quite sorted through that. Yeah.
So what are some of your ideas on how that might be documented? So let's say there are others listening who are interested in documenting social determinants of health. What are just some of your ideas? They don't have to. They're draft. What are your draft ideas on how we can do that?
Yeah, good question. Well, there is an organization out of Ontario called the Upstream Lab.
Upstream Lab.
So they're developing a tool and piloting and testing it right now called the Spark tool. And so they've developed a series of questions. And one of the most well-researched and validated questions actually is around poverty. So there's one question basically, which is, do you have difficulty making ends meet at the end of the month? And so that question has proven to be both sensitive and specific for poverty. And then, you know, if you could identify, like, there's that one simple question comes across as, I think, non-judgmental, non-stigmatizing, and could tell you a lot about where your patient is at and what kind of services they may need.
That's
so
cool.
Then you'd want to kind of look at the types of language you could use to ask people about their social circumstances that is non-stigmatizing, and then also be sensitive to who's asking it, when they're asking it, and how it's being asked. So I know there's a lot of or some people who are asking, like, the ACE questionnaire, for example, and sort of
that's intense.
That kind of question. There can be some questions that can be triggering for people. So we're still sort of thinking through and trying to sort out when and how is it appropriate to ask certain questions. So do we, you know, is it appropriate to ask some of those questions at intake when you first meet the patient, but is it more appropriate to wait until for other questions until you've built a relationship, you know, and like sort of say, okay, let's revisit, you know, maybe send yourself a task, future, you know, 6 months down the road, revisit this person's sort of social history, if you want to call it that. So.
Well, thank you. That's really interesting, and I think most people are not documenting these things. I've heard of some talk from who was it? Bill Clifford. He was speaking about some metrics on it, but I didn't get the details, so I actually don't know. So if I ever learn that, I'll share what he's doing with his with MOIS, right?
Okay.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about the how you did it and how long. What it is, what a CHC is. Was it these past 3 years, 2019 inception until now we're sitting here in a beautiful space? Was it, how would you rate it on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is like, I would never do that again, that was so challenging, to 0 is like piece of cake. It just it happened on its own. What would you give it, 0 to 10?
I would say it was extremely challenging. I wouldn't say that I would never do it again, though.
So like a 7?
Probably more. Probably more. It was extreme. But the thing
like
that
a
made
9?
it probably.
Oh my gosh, a 9 out of 10 on the difficulty scale.
It was really difficult, but I think the reason
it's so rewarding
that it was successful is that as the ball got rolling, there were more and more of us to help shoulder the load, kind of, you know. So we ended up having enough, you know, 4 or 5, 6 of us, kind of all doing different pieces, sort of pushing.
Are these all
on
6
different
doctors or who? 6
No,
doctors?
not at all. Yeah,
Okay.
no, we had, you know, Randall, myself, we had Liz, our executive director. We had Shauna, our board chair. We have Nicola, our primary care director. Like, so different people have lifted different heavy pieces at different times. Yeah.
But you all had a really pretty good shared vision of what this might look like for the past 3 years.
Yeah.
So it was pretty crystal clear. Like,
yeah,
we're going to be in this space.
We actually had a visioning mission sort of determining session, and
Who facilitated that? Was that you?
No, actually, that was in November of 2019, and who did facilitate it? I think it was actually 2 of the staff here at Pacific Center.
So there's some skills in visioning and team facilitation.
Specifically to determine a mission, mission, vision, statement, and core values. And so it was sort of like brought together different stakeholders. We did that. And then out of that session, we developed like a briefing document, basically, like a 2 or 3 pager. And then that is kind of what we use to kind of hammer away at the health authority and the Ministry of Health and the leadership team, the different people until it just kind of, I'm not exactly sure who made the final decision that we would get funding, to be honest, but somehow it materialized. So.
Do you recall some of those core values of your team? What are some of those that you remember that came out of that session?
I feel like I remember that respect was a big one, and equity.
The top 2 were probably respect for people and equity. And what does that mean to you? What is equity? People are like, people are talking about equity a lot. It's it's the 5th aim in the quintuple.
Oh, really?
So what does that mean? Equity.
I probably won't give you a textbook definition.
I don't want a textbook.
But I think it means that you, again, that you're kind of looking upstream to look at the bigger picture factors that affect people's health.
Yeah.
And that you design your systems and your services around removing barriers that are generated by those forces. So
by inequitable system design.
Yeah, so for certain people you would see things like colonization or transphobia or racism that are really big barriers to people to having good health, number one, and to accessing health care that meets their needs. And so if you take that and look at your organization and try to design it in a way that unpacks those forces and makes them less, I don't know, if not a factor maybe, but less of a factor in their healthcare, then hopefully that means that they're equally able to achieve good health and access to healthcare as anyone else.
So what you've just said is that one of the core values of your team is helping people by removing barriers to them receiving great quality healthcare.
I think so.
Yeah. Now you said it was almost like a 9 out of 10 difficulty. You said you'd do it again only because it came to fruition. What made it so hard? What pushed that number to 9 out of 10? What are some of those barriers that people might expect?
I think one of the big barriers is that there was no clear process.
Okay.
From
you're breaking new ground.
The Ministry of Health, and I mean, Ministry had a policy sort of document around community health centers, but it was still very early in their sort of thinking around the funding model and how it could roll out and what it could look like, and so that was probably the biggest barrier is not having a clear understanding of what the process even was to advance an idea of this nature or to apply for funding. So
are you saying there's no web page or app you can download that says, do you want to start at CHC? Apply here. There's nothing like that? No. No, it was predominantly, there was a lot of word of mouth. There was a lot of, who and here, this is what you should do next, and just having to kind of, and the PCN setup is a bit confusing too. So, who's responsible for what in the PCN versus Ministry of Health versus Island Health versus,
these different kind of committees and so on, trying to navigate sort of who makes decisions, right? Who decides, yes, you get funding, or no, you don't. Quite unclear. Or what the criteria are for that.
And you guys, as almost like a 6-person team, you said, we're navigating that very unclear landscape. Who were some of the key relationship brokers for you who were like, oh, yeah, go here. Like, how did you guys figure it out?
I think Gray Schiller.
Gray who worked at Kool-Aid.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kool-Aid is not something like everybody in BC knows about. Like, I only heard of Kool-Aid because I was at an Oscar EMR session at UVic, and then somebody said, I work at Kool-Aid. I was like, that sounds delicious. But it's like, it's another health services nonprofit, is it?
It's a community health center in downtown inner city Victoria.
So it was.
I think it's more than that because I don't work there, but Kool-Aid is I believe very large organization, and then one of the things that they do is deliver health services as well. And they have a mission again around health equity as well. Yeah, but they're more of a typical kind of inner city setting. Okay. Whereas we're more in a little bit more urban, more of a suburban, semi-rural. Yeah. And so Gray had experience from Kool-Aid. Yeah. And was like, I know these are the players. Yeah, and BC Association of Community Health Centers, and he suggested the connection with these folks, and so that was pretty key. It's funny because I was doing my solder course at the time, and so and I had not long ago completed Quality Academy, so the kind of material that we learned around like the pitching and the speeches and the Marshall Gants and remember that public narrative, giving the talk and all the that platform, and what do you call that thing? The the 5 steps? The leader script, that one. The 5 things, so the hook. Yeah. The grabber. The grabber, exactly. I totally used that. What was your grabber? I don't remember. That was a long time ago now. But I absolutely used that. I had to pitch it at the different levels of the PCN. I had to pitch it at the CS Collaborative Services Committee. I had to pitch it here, there, everywhere. Yeah. I got a little pitched out, but eventually it worked, and I think too. Actually, I really believe that the patient partners on our different committees were a big force in getting this approved. I actually do believe that. That's so cool. What else can I say about that? I have a question. So it's clear to me, having known you for a couple of years now, that you have a huge heart for those who are marginalized. Where did that come from? Is that just something that you were born with? Were there mentors or models for you that really inspired you to fight for equity as you do? And you're very mild mannered. I would say you're soft spoken. But I know that there's this raging fire inside you. So where does this come from? It's funny. It's fascinating to me. Tell me about that. I don't know. You don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't really say. It's fun. It's fun to know about you and then see you do these fantastic things and push yourself out of your comfort zone, because I think that's part of the 9 out of 10, that it wasn't part of your natural nature to rock the boat as much as you have to design something like this. Yeah. True. Yeah. I'm taking the summer off. I'm really tired. Please do. Actually, that's an interesting point, though. That reminds me of my residents who. Yeah. So I have a resident graduating in a couple of weeks. Yeah. She's going to cover the summer for me. Okay. And actually, having residents has played a big role in me having time to do this work. Yes. Because they're so helpful in the office. So, being able to kind of. Yeah. What is the key to being a preceptor that residents want to work with? Oh, God, I don't know. No idea. Asking you the tough questions today. I don't know. You'd have to ask one of the residents, I guess.
I
I think
will.
maybe, yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably about how passionate you are about your job.
Yeah, I think it's passion. I think it's passion. I think it's
And being approachable, I guess.
approachable.
Teaching and supporting them and
About
all
being
those things.
authentic as well.
I guess, yeah.
And then having a values alignment where the learners also care about how you care about patients.
Yeah, true, for sure.
So you have a purpose-driven team.
Yeah.
You're addressing social determinants of health as much as you can. You guys have done a visioning session with the values. Tell us a little bit about the team makeup. So it's how many physicians are in this team and nurses?
For sure. So our funding is for 6.26 full-time equivalent of family doctor. And we actually have 9 actual doctors who make up that component. And so we are in fact fully staffed for physicians now. And we have 3 full-time equivalents for nurse practitioners, and we're sort of slowly getting our complement of NPs in place. And we have 4 full-time nursing positions. We have 1 social work position. We have 3 community health worker positions, and we have 1 elder in residence.
Wow.
And then Pacific Center already has something between like 20 and 25 clinical counselors on staff.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so quite a big team.
Was it hard for you to leave your existing team to come to this one, or did they all migrate?
They came with me.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's a piece that's I think a bit unique, which is that we're just a small 3 part-time family physician practice, and Randall's clinic at ABI comprised about 1 full-time equivalent there as well. And so we were able to kind of bring ourselves into this setting, not using like the PCN resources to do that. We basically just went on contract, similar to how other people do, and then added on the PCN contracts to us. Yeah.
What this space is so beautiful. You've had talented architects and interior designers work on it. Are you able to shout out who these designers and architects might? How might people, if they like the photos here and the videos, how might they contact these talented artists?
The architect was Bruce Greenway, and his website is Greenway Studio.
GreenwayStudio.ca?
Or something.
Okay, Google Greenway Studio.
Bruce Greenway, and
it's okay. Like you probably just contracted him. You don't know him, so it's. And your interior designer?
Interior designer, Sandra Lyle Mason.
Okay, so
Lyle Mason Design.
Okay, Lyle Mason Design. Easy.
Yeah, I'll supply you with both of their Instagram accounts.
Yes, please. This is one of the most beautiful clinics I've seen in my life, and I'm so impressed. You mentioned that a CHC has a unique governance model, and part of that is that there is a board. And I'm guessing this board is diverse. You've mentioned things about patient partners. You've mentioned some linkage to Indigenous voices. Tell me about that governance model that makes this clinic's leadership different from, let's say, a solo physician practice.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the board has undergone quite a lot of development in the last couple of years, as it had to sort of almost repurpose this organization to include the delivery of primary care services.
Yeah.
So quite a big transformation for this organization, and the board has done a lot of work to learn more about that. And the woman who's the board chair at the moment has been kind of the driving force behind that, which has been amazing. But it includes a number of different folks, and the board's role really is about, again, the high level vision. They mostly don't get down into the operations That's really more the role of the executive director. Although the board is extremely supportive, they often are involved in fundraising or, they come here from time to time, do different things for us. But the operations are really the executive director that's her role, and then under the executive director within our organization, we have a director of primary care, a director of counseling, community services, and a director of finance. And the medical director, which is me. So there's, the director is responsible for their different portfolios to deliver the services. So.
On site, on the day-to-day operations, you have a
Yep.
clinic manager.
Yep.
You got nurses. You have MOAs.
Yep.
And then the physicians.
Yes.
And so you said around 6 FTEs.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there's 6 docs at one time on.
Oh no.
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 It's usually 1 or 2.
Because we have extended hours, so we're open 8 to 8,
Oh,
Monday
wow.
to Thursday, Fridays and Saturdays.
Mhm.
So the way the schedule works, there's 2 physicians on each shift. So the shift is like 8 to 4 and then 12 to 8. So there's some overlap in the middle of the day. But yeah, no, that's the way the schedule works for the docs.
I see.
Yeah.
In this renovation of this space that was previously used probably more for counseling only, were there any major physical infrastructure changes or upgrades you had to do?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah?
Well, actually, the layout of these rooms was essentially the same, but they were counseling rooms, so there's no plumbing.
Oh, you had to put plumbing in every room.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So that was a big thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, all the millwork and so on.
Yeah.
This, I'll show you after, the sort of hub area where the MOAs and the charting room and so on, that was a boardroom.
Oh.
So that was made into an MOA space, and we have there's actually another meeting room on the other side. So Pacific Center did have to give up one of its meeting rooms, but we do have another one. The front sort of administrative area was renovated a fair bit to sort of make a little bit more efficient use of the space. Color, like flooring and paint and all that were all redone. We did have a meeting where we invited a couple more of the docs. I can't now remember exactly who was there, but where Sandra did present sort of the color kind of mock-up and the cabinetry and a little bit more about and so we did have one session where we kind of dove into detail on some exam room layout stuff and so on. But yeah, we really didn't have the time to make a huge deal. We had to let the designers do their job, right?
Yes. As long as you got to get out of the way.
Yeah. You don't want to micromanage.
No.
This kind of thing would never work if you micromanage.
No, you got to be kind of loose with it.
Yeah.
And you got to trust your team members.
Exactly.
To be able to be fully capable and to make good decisions.
Exactly.
And even if it's not what you like,
yes,
you can adapt and roll with it because it works for somebody else.
Yeah, it's a little bit like in a marriage. It's like, what are the things you can't live? Like, what are the deal breakers, right?
Yeah.
And then what are the things you can live with and all that.
So you've been on a fantastic teamwork journey in order to make this happen today.
Yeah.
To get where you are. What is something that you can now do for the community that you could not do 3 years ago because this team exists, or because the space exists, because you're in a CHC?
Yeah.
What's different?
Well, we can offer new patient attachment.
Yeah,
we can offer healthcare to eventually, hopefully, over 6,000 people who didn't have it before. Yeah. The challenge is, though, that there are over 60,000 people in this area without a family doctor.
Oh my God.
And so there's a tremendous amount of need out there. So our real dilemma now is how to prioritize people with the greatest need and what that means exactly.
Yeah.
And how you actually do that.
So the challenges don't end. It's still really challenging.
Oh yeah, it's still very challenging.
But in 3 short years, which I'm sure flew by, you've been able to coalesce a multidisciplinary team that is now going to be able to serve more than 6,000 British Columbians, 10% of the need in your area.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's the idea.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I celebrate you, for this achievement and your whole team, and to Randall, amazing work. It's an honor to know you guys. You know, we had the opportunity to travel to Alaska. And
That's right, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did some of those learnings
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
influence?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's one of the things that you think you brought from the Nuka South Central
Yeah.
Alaska system of health into this team?
I think the team, the multiple team members, and I'm hoping that the nursing role in particular will be expanded to include a lot of good sort of case management, follow-up of complex people, and more proactive care. So I think that's one of the pieces I remember from the NUCA system, is the very strong role of the nursing team.
I was really impressed by how empowered those team members felt. Whereas in my current work situation, everything lands on me, the family doctor's plate. My MOAs are not, they haven't gotten the privilege to learn how to manage these things. But you have team members here who can actually carry some of the load.
Exactly.
Do you think that will help with making your work life more sustainable?
I hope so.
Oh my gosh, I hope so too.
That's my hope.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking this time with me today and for sharing so generously your experience.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people will benefit from that. Maybe you can give me a tour now.
Absolutely,
And I'll
yeah.
get out of your hair.